Hey guys! One of my favorite things to talk about in design history are periods of change in the direction of design, or basically rebellion from the current trends. The arts and crafts movement is exactly that. It's an era of design reform from Industrial Revolution factory production and the excessive ornament of the Victorian era. Arts and crafts designers wanted to recapture qualities that had been lost in machine made goods and return to hand craftsmanship. The arts and crafts movement began in England in the 1860s as a reform movement. A writer named John Ruskin is known as the reform's philosophical leader. He was the most influential of all Victorian writers on the arts. He denounced the taste of the Victorian public and mass produced design. Ruskin believed that the machine dehumanized the worker and led to a loss of dignity because it removed him from the artistic process and thus removed him from nature itself. Pretty philosophical, but a lot of people subscribe to his ideas. Ruskin stated, "All cast from the machine is bad. As work, it is dishonest." He hated the Crystal Palace and said the exhibits there showed the disastrous level Victorian design had reached. So, while Ruskin built the philosophical foundation of the arts and crafts movement, it was William Morris who became its design leader. Morris took Ruskin's ideas about nature, art, morality, and the degradation of human labor and translated them into a unified theory of design. By doing so, Morris successfully wedded aesthetics and social reform into the arts and crafts movement. Morris was also appalled at the over the top ornamentation of Victorian design produced by machines in mass quantity. He was equally belligerent as Ruskin, denouncing industrial products that were featured in the Crystal Palace exhibitions. This is the Red House. It was designed by Morris's friend and architect Philip Webb. It's a really good demonstration of Morris's ideas. The red brick exterior gives the house its name. Morris and Webb valued natural materials, which they saw as superior to industrially produced materials. All of the home design features are strictly functional. For example, window and door placement as a direct result of the interior plan, chimneys that serve actual fireplaces, and the house serves as a real water well. So if you summarize that, in general, arts and crafts design is about natural materials, functionality, bringing together something that is useful and beautiful. Morris took inspiration from the Middle Ages, especially the medieval idea of craftsmen's guilds. Morris, along with architect Philip Webb, painter Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and a few others, founded Morris & Co. in 1875. This is Wightwick Manor. It's one of the only few surviving examples of a house built and furnished under the influence of the arts and crafts movement. For those of you who have studied architectural history from antiquity to the Industrial Revolution, you might notice quite a bit of the Gothic influences. The house is just a really notable example of the influence of William and Morris, and this picture definitely showcases that with his likeness carved right into the woodwork. Arts and crafts interiors take influence from a medieval hall with exposed beams on the ceiling, deep-toned wood floors, flat-woven carpets, wood-paneled walls, and wallpaper in medieval themes or stylized florals. An ingle nook is a common arts and crafts feature, which is a recessed seating area that adjoins a fireplace. This inspiration is taken from the Middle Ages when the hearth was used for cooking, and its enclosed alcove became a natural place for people seeking warmth and to gather. The Morris & Co. Guild created simple furniture, stained glass, wallpaper that united beauty, craftsmanship, and utility. The Sussex armchair, designed by Philip Webb, was based on rural prototypes. It became the most popular piece made by the Morris firm and was produced from 1865 all the way into the 1930s. This is the adjustable back Morris chair. It introduced the innovative concept of reclined seating. Many have copied it, but the original prototypes are actually Morris's design. Basically, you could call him the OG designer of the recliner. Morris's designs are always based on natural motifs: plants, flowers, and birds. Vegetable dyes are used instead of chemical aniline dyes that were invented during the Victorian period. So the vegetable dyes make the colors more muted earth tones. Morris's wallpaper were hand printed with copper plates. He emphasized hand craftsmanship, nature, and simplicity of form. You might actually recognize some of Morris's designs through the clothing company H&M. Last fall, they released a whole line of fashion that recognized Morris's archival prints. So, to be honest, Morris wasn't wholly successful in translating the arts and crafts philosophy into a practical application. One of the most difficult obstacles was how to produce beautiful, handcrafted items that could be affordable to the working classes. He never successfully overcame this problem, and most British arts and crafts items remained the luxury of the upper classes. But despite this, the arts and crafts movement swept England and spread to America. British ideas were disseminated in America through journals, newspaper articles, as well as through societies that sponsored lectures and programs. The U.S. movement was multi-centered, with societies forming nationwide. Boston, historically linked to English culture, was the first city to feature a society of arts and crafts. It was founded in June of 1897. Chicago's Arts and Crafts Society began at Hull House, one of the first American settlement houses for social reform. In October 1897, they got their start. Numerous societies followed in cities such as Minneapolis and New York, as well as some rural towns too, including Deerfield, Massachusetts. Hull House was founded in 1889 by Jane Addams and Ellen Gates Starr in an immigrant neighborhood in the west side of Chicago. It functioned as both a social center for the neighborhood and as a home base for social activists. They focused on innovative social, educational, and artistic programs that gave way to progress for women's rights and helped women break into traditionally male-dominant occupations. The American arts and crafts movement became centered around these societies, and a few utopian communities popped up too that produced artistic handicrafts like furniture, pottery, textiles, metalwork, and bookbinding. This linen press was made in Woodstock, New York, at the Birdcliff Arts and Crafts Colony. In Boston, there was a group called the Saturday Evening Girls Club. It was established in 1899 as a reading group for immigrant girls. They founded Paul Revere Pottery, which began producing pottery in 1908 and offered the girls the ability to earn good wages within the community. Newcomb Pottery is another example. This was established in New Orleans and was actually formed at an all-women's college. They produced pottery using southern flora and fauna as inspiration for their pottery, metalwork, and textiles. Here's an example of an embroidered textile done at Newcomb around 1910. So, because the arts and crafts movement was made up of societies in many different locations, the philosophy of craftsmanship preserved, but materials and style had a pretty large range. So there's regional differences from the East Coast to the Midwest to California. On the East Coast, the arts and crafts movement is most closely linked with the more conservative British style. The leading figure in the craftsman movement in America was Gustav Stickley. He was a member of a family that operated several furniture factories. He became interested in the writings of Ruskin and Morris, and he made a trip to England to see the arts and crafts work being produced there. Stickley believed that mass-produced furniture was poorly constructed and overly complicated in design. He set out to improve American taste through craftsmanship or mission style furniture, with designs governed by honest construction, simple lines, and quality material. His work is based on the notion that furniture should be honest as a reaction against the fake joinery, unnecessary gaudiness, and shoddy workmanship of the many pieces created in the early days of industrial furniture making. He founded the Craftsman Workshops, emulating William Morris's guild model of production to manufacture his furniture. Stickley had a strong hand in recruiting and converting other designers to the philosophy of the arts and crafts movement through his society. So sometimes you will hear it called arts and crafts, sometimes you will hear it called craftsman, or even mission style. All of these refer to the same ideas and philosophies. Stickley also published the highly influential periodical called The Craftsman. It was a beacon for the American arts and crafts movement. The magazine molded British ideals to suit American style and helped to set America apart as unique and independent from Britain. It was the most read periodical of its kind and helped to foster American activity and prowess in architecture, interior decoration, furniture, metalwork, and ceramics. You may have actually seen Stickley's furniture before. It's still in production today. He made very simple furniture with massive forms, made out of solid oak, assembled with craftsmanly wood joints, iron hardware, and leather cushions. A lot of people copied Stickley's work, but his was of better quality and design. He first sold his chairs by mail order, then added textiles, lamps, and carpets to his catalogs. Eventually, he developed a whole bungalow kit, but we'll talk more about that a little later in the lecture under the bungalow style. First, here's a few examples. This is a Stickley interior. This is actually his personal home. It's now the Stickley Museum. It's called Craftsman Farms, and it's in New Jersey. This is an original Gustav Stickley Morris chair in fumed oak at the Stickley Museum in Craftsman Farms. This is an interior built using Stickley's advice from the Craftsman magazine and plans published in the December 1903 issue. There's another craftsman, Elbert Hubbard. He founded the Roycroft Institution in East Aurora, New York. He published monthly magazines, The Fray and The Philistine, to spread his beliefs about the movement and opinions on design. There are several other publications of the time, like House Beautiful, Ladies' Home Journal. Both of them are still in production today. That was also a way to get ideas about design and interiors out to the general public in America. In these magazines, they said the ideal home was an open-planned interior with a color palette of the natural environment. Articles gave decorating suggestions for using colors, types of furniture, and decorative accessories. Sources like Gruby pottery might have been suggested. Notice the natural motifs of the arts and crafts style with the stylized leaf designs on this pottery. Gruby is known for their naturally shaped vessels and characteristic matte green glaze, which became really popular to the period pottery. The glaze was inspired by flambe glazes of the French art pottery that Gruby saw at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago in 1893. There was also a Native American undercurrent developing in the American arts and crafts movement as we look to our own unique heritage as a continent separate from Britain. The use of Native American decorative baskets and textiles became very fashionable for the time. Here's an example by Louis Comfort Tiffany. He designed a hanging lampshade that is reminiscent of a Native American basket motif. Louis Comfort Tiffany is the son of the founder of Tiffany & Company Jewelers, which you probably know. He's famous for his Favril glass, which he used to create vases, bowls, lamps, windows, and other accent pieces. The lampshades on the slide are made of leaded glass, with bronze hardware and several Gruby pottery bases. Moving to the Midwest. The arts and crafts scene began with the Chicago Arts and Crafts Society at Hull House, again in October 1897, as we discussed earlier. It was one of the first American settlement houses for social reform. It's here in the Midwest that we should talk about Frank Lloyd Wright. He was born in Wisconsin, and he's one of the most notorious designers from the Midwest. He took on a new way of completely designing environments, for the architecture to the interior finishes and the furniture. This is another shot of the living room from the little house in Wayzata, Minnesota. Frank Lloyd Wright started a style of architecture called the Prairie School movement, which was characterized by low-pitched roofs with broad overhangs, open interiors, and long horizontal lines that reflected the prairie landscape, which was very much in keeping with the arts and crafts philosophy of organic, nature-based influences. The Willits House was designed in 1901, and it was built in a suburb of Chicago, Highland Park, Illinois. It's considered one of the first great prairie houses. If you take a look at the image, note some of the horizontal bands of windows, very low, long horizontal walls at the ground level that really extend outward, giving additional horizontal emphasis to the house plan. Here, you can also notice the long horizontal lines in the plan view of the house. Wright used natural materials like wood, clay, and stone. He is also very well known for custom stained glass windows. Because the style was of plain surfaces and minimal decoration, it gave in very easily to using machinery to craft the style, and resulted in some pretty intense rectilinearity. The Bradley House is another example of Frank Lloyd Wright's prairie style, reflecting the landscape. Wright's growing reputation brought him a number of non-residential building commissions also, including the large 4-story office building for the Larkin Company in Buffalo, New York. Open, general office spaces are arranged a central, skylit courtyard, a vast interior space with Wright's unique decorative details. There's highly innovative metal furniture and light fixtures that were designed for this building so that every interior element would be a part of a unified design concept. Here's a look at some examples of famous furniture pieces, such as the spindle chair, circa 1902. You can note the really elongated back accentuated by those spindles. Again, you can see the use of Frank Lloyd Wright spindles in this print table from 1903. The top is hinged in the center so that it can be folded to use as a sideboard. We saw a similar design in this at the Larkin Company. William Gray Purcell and George Grant Elmsley were the second most popular Prairie School architects, with firms in Minneapolis and Chicago. The Purcell Cutts House, built in 1913, is the image that you're looking at on the screen. It's a long, narrow floor plan with a house that disregarding Victorian concepts about room divisions. The house features a multi-purpose living room with 3 focal points for activity. The first is in the east end, where a 14-foot window seat runs the width of the room. The window wall wraps around the north and south corners of the room, creating a sense that nature is enveloping the space. The window seat feature serves as a kind of room within a room. Purcell and Elmsley quickly discovered, to their horror, that when they would design a residence in prairie style, people would move into them with their old Victorian furniture. So in order to create a unified interior, they not only implemented built-in furniture, but specially designed pieces for the interior, which became typical of prairie-style interior design. Moving to the West Coast. The West Coast follows the arts and crafts traditions, but combines the look with inspiration from Spain and Japan. The term mission style often refers to the surviving Spanish missions. Charles Sumner Green and Henry Mather Green are brothers, known as Green and Green, and they drew on the craftsman tradition and the stick style, referring to Gustav Stickley. The brothers were exposed to Japanese architecture at the World's Fair in Chicago and St. Louis. They fashioned a distinctive West Coast style of arts and crafts, heavily influenced by Asian design that reached its final point with the bungalow. The bungalow became the quintessential arts and crafts form of architecture, which was characterized by broad, overhanging eaves, articulated woodwork, and an open plan. Green and Green designed the Blacker House in Pasadena using this Japanese-influenced design. Green and Green operated in the same style as Wright, Purcell, and Elmsley to design a complete package of architecture and interiors that made a total work of art. Here are just two examples of dozens of pieces of furniture, lighting, stained glass windows, and even the heat register plates for the Blacker House. Everything was custom designed for the house. It was a total work of art. The Gamble House, which was built by Green Brothers for the Procter & Gamble family in 1908, is known as one of the most authentic and well-preserved examples of the arts and crafts movement that spread like a wildfire in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Pasadena. Every detail of the house was crafted by hand with an abundance of natural materials. Green and Green revealed the structural composition of a house. Its beams, columns, and brackets are all visible. The extended overhanging eaves act as a cooling agent while protecting the porch from the rain. Shown here is one of the living spaces that's filled with intricate woodworking and handcrafted furniture. Also found throughout the house are complete collections of tile, pottery, and art glass that were compiled by the resident family. The home is surrounded by open porches that are constructed of cedar. The house's art glass, shown here on the front door, acted as a way to bring light into the space before there was electricity. Thus, it acted as a functional work of art. Do you guys remember what the built-in seating area around a fireplace is called? It was called an ingle nook. Here we see another good example of one. And lastly, we'll go to what we call the bungalow style. It's really the knockdown version of the more extravagant scale that we've been looking at. The bungalow style is meant for the masses to afford. They were designed for simplicity and economy with convenience, practicality, and flexibility as priorities. Their design is often compared to that of like a ship cabin, which refers to how compacted into a small space with a ton of flexibility. One of the trends that's current today you might think about are like the tiny house. So bungalows were incredibly popular at the time because they were both affordable and able to be ordered out of magazines. From 1908 to 1940, Sears, Roebuck and Company sold about 70 to 75,000 homes through their mail-order Modern Homes program. Over that time, Sears designed 447 different housing styles. They ranged from elaborate multi-stories called the Ivanhoe, with its elegant French doors and art glass windows, to the simpler Goldenrod, which served as a quaint 3-room and no-bath cottage for summer vacationers. You could actually purchase an outhouse separately for the Goldenrod and similar cottage dwellers. Customers could choose a house to suit their individual tastes and budgets. So here's how it worked. You could order plans and have a complete package of labeled house parts to be delivered to the chosen lot for assembly. It sounds like a total IKEA nightmare to me, but this is the way it worked. So the packages included all of the structural elements as well as built-in furniture, fixtures, and finished millwork. Typically, there was a large front porch that acted as a room of its own and provided some overflow space for the living room when large parties were present. You enter directly into the living room, a much more casual entrance. Floor plans revolved around a central living room, which was focused around a fireplace with built in seating, bookcases, creating an inglenook. So we see a lot of the same design features that we've already talked about. Inglenooks, half walls, built-in window seats, all of these are trademark characteristics. Bungalows used half walls so that space wasn't divided into tiny small rooms, but rather created a much more open feel. So they help the space seem larger, but provide visual access to the windows. You can also see built-in window seating beside the fireplace. With small square footage, space was not left for hallways, so the living room also acted as circulation space. The living room was where all family gatherings took place because typically it was the only public space. Some larger designs had a den as well. Here we see more examples of half walls that help create a more open plan and make the space feel larger. Notice that these half walls actually also double as bookcases. This image shows how the front door enters directly into the living space and eliminates the formal parlor. You also see on the left there what we call the Dirk van Erp lamp. Most front doors were simple, wooden, and severe. Some had stained glass inserts, like the one you see here on the left. Here we see the Native American influences coming out, which we talked about earlier becoming a really popular trend of the time period. So if a bungalow did have a den, like I mentioned a minute ago, it could typically be used as a dining room or a study retreat. They could have built-in bookshelves and desks so that it could function as both. Here's another study version of the den. And here we see a dining room version. This one is a version that actually combines the two. Kitchens typically had a small eating area within it, like a built-in breakfast nook. Many of the floor plans also included small utility porches for laundry sinks and ice boxes. Bedrooms were small, sometimes buffered by a small corridor from the living room, but there were typically only a maximum of 2 bedrooms in any home. Beds like the Murphy bed was a new invention, and it was a way of disappearing the beds where the space could be saved when it could be put away. So to wrap all of that up, you can see how the arts and crafts movement worked its way from a philosophy and social reform movement to the crafting of small objects, to furniture and accessories, to interiors, architecture, and to a complete package of goods. It was eventually knocked down to this version that we just talked about in the bungalow that could be catalog ordered by the mass populace.